Less than 1% of homes in America have a battery on them. We think that's going to change, and it's going to be, it'll reach a majority in my lifetime. So we want to be a part of that, and we particularly want to go after some areas where batteries still don't make sense, and we want to build solutions that really make that possible. So,
are you speeding the energy transition? Here at the Clean Power Hour, our host Tim Montague bring you the best in solar, batteries, and clean technologies every week. Want to go deeper into decarbonization? We do too. We're here to help you understand and command the commercial, residential, and utility solar, wind, and storage industries. So let's get to it. Together we can speed the energy transition.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more. Hey guys, are you a residential solar installer doing light commercial but wanting to scale into large C&I solar? I'm Tim Montague. I've developed over 150 megawatts of commercial solar, and I've solved the problem that you're having. You don't know what tools and technologies you need in order to successfully close 100 kW to megawatt scale projects. I've developed a commercial solar accelerator to help installers exactly like you. Just go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on strategy, and book a call today. It's totally free with no obligation. Thanks for being a listener. I really appreciate you listening to the pod. And I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Go to Clean Power Hour and click strategy today. Thanks so much. Today on the Clean Power Hour, whole home backup. My guest today is James Showalter. He is the founder and CEO of EG4, the solar and battery company, and they also own Outback Power, Signature Solar, and Solar 76. So it's a family of companies in the solar industry. Welcome to the show, James.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Great to finally meet you. I've watched many interviews with you, James. You are quite famous in the residential home backup space, and I'm very excited to bring you on to the Clean Power Hour. You know, as I was saying, most of my clients work in both residential and commercial. I am a C&I solar expert myself, and I help my clients go on that journey into large C&I with the tech stack. But today, we want to really geek out on where are we at with whole home backup. If you're a homeowner and you want resiliency when the grid goes down, it's not a question of if, it's when. The grid is eventually going to go down. We're very lucky here in the U.S. We have a very reliable grid, generally speaking. But if you're in a storm-prone area, or in a fire-prone or high wind or whatever, right? You see these things and the grid goes down. So, James, before we get into the EG4 story, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got interested in the solar industry.
Yeah, Tim. I'm actually a pretty young guy, just turned 29, but I've been building solar systems since I was 15. Took my family off grid with a whole home solution that used BP solar panels back in 2012. And just done just enough research to be dangerous. And so I built my own off-grid system. I ran a contracting business in my hometown of Sulphur Springs, Texas, doing ranch services. Kind of got drafted into the solar install business back in the 2015 era with ranchers. I was kind of the kid that had taken my family off grid in the county, and so we ended up pivoting into installs in rural Northeast Texas. Ran that for about 5 years, and then decided to, that really the energy storage hardware was going to be the problem that needed to be solved for the viability of the industry out in places like where I lived. And I decided to get involved in hardware distribution and ultimately hardware creation to solve that issue back in 2019, 2020 timeframe. So that started me going from being an installer, which I left the install operation with my brother, and going into building hardware that was just designed around kind of the core job site functional economic needs that we had seen out in the field in East Texas.
Yeah. And what is it that customers want in your mind? Like, just paint us a picture. Do they want to be able to operate for a week off of grid or a month or inevitably?
Yeah, I think that you cross a threshold when you get past more than 12 hours of reserve, right? That 12 to 20 hours of reserve, you cross a threshold where if tied with the solar system, you can go indefinitely. And so I think homeowners would prefer to be back in a position where they can connect to the grid if necessary, right? And in a valuable way, but they want to be in a position where they could make their own energy. I think the point you're making about backup when to start this conversation, it's you know our luck with having a reliable grid is something is some evaporating luck as of right now. With the AI surge, you're having the Department of Energy come out and say, hey, we're looking at, over 100 hours of power outages on average for Americans within the next 5 years. Up to 800 hours is their high level prediction. So homeowners want, if they're going to invest in an energy system, I think universally they would like to have indefinite peace of mind on their power.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a hardware challenge of how do you create a hardware solution that does that and delivers enough power to do it. And then the other economic targets that I think batteries are central to solving.
Yeah. I mean, everybody wants a battery. The question is, how much battery can you afford, really? One rule of thumb I've learned is to have a resilient home, and it depends on how big the home is, but we're talking something like a 30 kilowatt hour battery, and probably at least a 7 kW, maybe a 10 kW solar array. Of course, it depends on what climate you're in. Are you in northern Illinois or in southern Texas? The amount of solar radiation hitting those two spots on Earth is quite different. And the more solar radiation you get, the less solar you need to capture all those photons and convert them to electrons to store in your battery. But that question of affordability comes up very quickly. How do you tackle that?
Yeah, I think it's if you talk about starting at a 30 kilowatt hour target for real resiliency, you got to define your system differently. You got to build hardware that's optimized for your 30 plus kilowatt hour size. And I think ultimately the hardware design in the industry right now is focused somewhere between 10 to 30 instead of 30 to 60, which is what you need for medium to large size homes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so you have to define what your target job is, and then you have to build your hardware around those definitions. So I think there's actually opportunity there to wrap, 30, 40% cost advantages. If you're, for instance, in our original ESS we had this year, it's DC first. The cost per kilowatt hour for the DC battery, a pure DC battery, is very low, very low. And then the whole home inverter EMS solution is a separate cost that, plays really well when you get to that 30 plus kilowatt hour size, but, isn't, terribly more advantageous in the 13 to 20 kilowatt hour range. So it's really just like in any other kind of engineering. I think your outcome is only as competitive as you spec the application. So I think we start with that 30 to 60 target,
Yeah.
and in terms of understanding how we can provide value.
So let's step back for a second. You grew from being an installer to now being an equipment manufacturer and seller. What is exactly EG4, and what are you bringing to the American consumer?
So we're a battery OEM, and the platform company you talked about, Energy X Innovations, also owns a factory. So we manufacture for the factory manufactures for EG4 out of Texas. And also, we have some international resources that we're working with over the as compliance targets become necessary. But we're a hardware OEM. What's unique about us is exactly what I was saying is that we're going after a different kind of customer than I think with different set of priorities than the solar industry has been going after. Right? We're going after customers that are burning over 1,200 kilowatt hours a month that want real energy independence. I mean, up to 3 or 4,000 kilowatt hours a month, and we're building solutions that really embrace that. Um, I think that the battery market's saturated with a focus on the smaller energy usage customers that aren't as serious about wanting whole home backup, and that sector of the market's already very very heavily served, and it's not really our target area.
Yeah, so you're referring to, for example, the Tesla Powerwall. I think that's a 13 kWh product. And, batteries are very useful. There is a stack that they provide, which we've covered extensively on the show. I won't repeat all of that here, but, they come in units, right? So let's just say you have a 10 kWh building block. You can install, many of those up to 6, 10 of them maybe. So you can get as much storage as you want in theory. It's a matter of working out what will the grid operator allow if it's grid connected, and then what is practical from a financial perspective. But what else, I guess, should prosumers and installers be thinking about when in this whole home space? What am I missing?
Well, I mean, it depends on the particular market, right? But I think covering there's a general ratio of kilowatts of solar. If you're a solar customer and you're looking at what's the right battery system stack, the kilowatt hours of storage versus kilowatts of solar ratio. I don't think people really start hitting their economic and experience targets on backup and on net metering until they're somewhere in the neighborhood of 3+ kilowatt hours per kilowatt, right? Which is, I think, a really driving high number that you see for your 12, 14, 15 kilowatt homeowners, especially which, as the solar industry is going into the South, people are encountering a lot more. And so that's just kind of a step one. The other phase that we're dealing with in the short term is virtual power plant. And virtual power plant is monetizing your value of price per kilowatt hours every month, feeding the grid where they're basically renting your battery. So job economic strategies that put more kilowatt hours on the table for the same price will create a higher virtual power plant monthly revenue opportunity, which can help you reduce the cost of the system. Even in a privately held system in the previously 25D market, I think virtual power plant has the monetary potential at a 60 kilowatt hour range, 40 to 60 kilowatt hour range, where the VPP could literally replace the whole value provided by the 25D tax credit if used properly. And then, I think thirdly, you're looking at the domestic content compliance for your lease and PPA vehicles that could be set up in a way that's a value add to the customer, right? So there's going to be some restrictions and specific needs for hardware that's not using Chinese IP, not using Chinese hardware, as prescribed by new government guidelines. So what is going to be out there in the next several years that can qualify for those domestic content demands and China content restrictions. What is the right sales and formulation strategy to create the best value for your homeowners on VPP, and how do you tie that into finance? And then also from an experience standpoint, how do you make sure there's enough kilowatt hours on the system to actually give you a backup experience? I think if homeowners are sold systems that include whole home backup, I think they would be really well served to, after the system is installed, to flip off the main power switch and try to live off that whole home backup and see if it lasts 8 hours, or if it really wasn't well thought out with things like smart load management, right? I mean, if somebody's just putting a power wall in your house and a meter collar, that's wonderful. But if you have any kind of heavy loads that could trip that inverter, uh, then you're not going to effectively have a backup system for more than 15 minutes in that case, right?
Yeah,
Or
the devil is in the details. When the grid goes down, right? Okay, let's just walk through that. So you've got solar and batteries, and then you have a transfer switch. So when the grid goes down, the switch isolates your system from the grid, which keeps the grid safe, so to speak. And then you're islanded, but you have to have a system that can withstand the loads that your home is putting on the hardware, then, right, on the battery, right? It's drawing, all of your loads are drawing on the battery. And what you're talking about is, do you have dynamic load shedding in the form of a smart panel, for example? Oftentimes there would just be a separate panel for backup, or you can do a smart panel which gives you dynamic capabilities. What is EG4's approach there?
Yeah, I mean, kind of reverse order. The original approach in this industry was a separate panel. And the problem with that was that by the time that you've paid an electrician to go and reroute a bunch of, partial backup loads and installed a separate panel, you spent thousands of dollars. And you've actually potentially made a worse backup situation in the first place. So that strategy has become really unpopular. And our approach is, okay, what's the other on the other end of the extreme? You could be taking your whole breaker panel out and trying to install an entire smart panel for 32 breakers that are smart controlled like a span. You could do that, but that is another. I mean, either approach, partial backup or whole home smart panel, you're not walking out of there for less than $6,000 all in, right? And so the approach that we tried to take was, okay, we built a gateway device that does the automatic transfer switch and load management, but it has 4 load managers in it. And we try to say is if we really look at these jobs, there's about 2 to 4 no-go loads that are either capable of draining your batteries fast and you don't want to you want to deprioritize them in a backup situation where you're only supporting them if the batteries are above a certain volume, or they use so much kilowatt power that you need to consider shedding them as well. So for instance, if you've got a heat pump, air conditioner, you probably have backups, heat furnace strips. Those are 10 to 20 kilowatts. If you have a 10 or 20 kilowatt load that can turn on randomly, you're going to need a lot more inverter power to make that make sense. Not to mention, it will eat the battery's lunch in the course of an hour or less.
Right.
You have tankless water heaters as another problem, right? That you could run into where you've got 17, 25 kilowatts of electric tankless water heater solution that you'd have to watch for. And so you have situations like that where people are wanting to be able to deprioritize 1 or 2 loads in the case of an emergency. Maybe a pool pump, for instance, is a good example. Or they've just got ones that it's just like ultimately, these are no-go loads. So when I was first installing off-grid systems in 2015, I would have, I remember consulting on this, and the homeowners wanted just a standard automatic transfer switch to back up the whole house, and they said, "Don't worry, we'll go cut off the furnace." I ended up having to go put in smart load management because they forgot that they were going to cut the furnace off, and they felt like they just had a broken system that broke every time it tried to go in a backup when the ice storm came. So
Yeah.
so that was one of the things that people lived with, and the smart load approach on EG4's side is let's not make it a $5,000 ordeal, but let's give you enough smart loads to do something with that you can actually provide a good experience. I think our average contractor's using 3.3 smart breakers out of 4. So that's essentially what it's worked out to, where, okay, we might reroute 2 to 4 smart loads, maybe an EV if it's not already, smart linked into the inverter, an EV charger or something like that, that lets you deprioritize that load as needed.
And what about the combination of solar battery plus a gas generator? Do you also work in that space?
Yeah, that was what one of the things that we tried to integrate with our gateway. So we have dedicated generator input, and we've got also DC direct generator integrations for the smaller generators. So I think we can work with some pretty dirty power generators if the grid if we're off grid and clean that up. So clean up the bad sine wave. So we thought our customers are very interested in the generator integration. So um, that was one of the things in the application spec we had to deliver on.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more. And in terms of, the array of products on your website is a little overwhelming, honestly. Check it out at EG4Electronics.com, and the sister company being Signature Solar, just like it sounds. But for this target of off-grid operation, let's just say continuous off-grid operation, we've agreed you need 30 kWh as a starting point, maybe as much as 60 kWh, and then you divide that by 3 to arrive at your solar PV figure in your jurisdiction, it sounds like. Is that the simple math that you do?
Typically, it's a good rule of thumb to check, right? I mean,
Yeah.
solar gets a lot more complicated when you got to sell a backup experience, unless you're kind of overbuilding the kilowatt hours. And the good news is that the virtual power plant's kind of creating the incentive for people to overbuild the kilowatt hours.
In how many markets in the U.S., and I know this is a moving target, we just got VPP legislation here in Illinois. It's not enacted yet, but it's on its way. So, but how many markets have good VPP legislation in the U.S., as far as you know?
So you're seeing some really strong ones in the Northeast, Colorado, Texas, and California, and Puerto Rico. Those are kind of ground one. Duke Energy's playing in the Carolinas. I think they're trying to open up a little more. So that's another market that we're seeing some traction in. And then, like you said, Illinois, we knew about them opening up a VPP structure as well. But I mean, honestly, if you look at this industry, we're not installing that many battery systems every year when you really think about it relative to the latent demand. I think we've got an industry that's probably doing not much above 200,000 battery systems a year.
And I'm not sure what your point is there, though, with the volume.
Well, VPP programs can dominate, even small regional programs can dominate the sales strategy of an OEM,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because of you've got any one of those areas, you got millions of people, you got millions of homes. And so you can go after virtual power plant adoption and it totally absorb all of your company's capacity in those particular areas. So you're seeing, I think, some particular plays, even players, TPOs we're seeing that are kind of saddling up and moving to particular regions where there's a VPP solution that makes sense to where they can add in their TPO margin, et cetera. So we've seen some of these residential PPAs go in and kind of lock in with a VPP region and just go push their volume all there.
Yeah. And so let's say I'm participating in a VPP program. So my battery is being monetized by a third party, let's just say the utility, to keep it simple. And that helps me afford the system. Okay, and that's great. We want affordability. But then there's also the risk that my battery is going to somehow be drained when the storm hits. So how do you work around that dynamic?
Absolutely. Good question, Tim. So you don't let your battery go to zero make that amount of storage available to your VPP program. I think it's going to be another consumer protection opportunity for people to mess things up, where they're going to go and put the whole battery capacity on there. So I think you need to reserve at least 20% of the battery storage with, on-site generation like solar, and potentially, a cheap backup generator if you want a third party, a third level of concern in that particular case,
Yeah.
of support for those issues. So don't let the VPP get your whole battery.
And but let's say the utility knows that, okay, in 24 hours, there's going to be a big ice storm and there's likely going to be outages. Will they take proactive action? Is that a requirement in terms of allowing consumers to hold on to more of the energy than in the batteries?
Yeah, yeah. So, that's that's a good question as to, how you're going to go about this. I think one of the things to put in perspective as well with these virtual power plant programs is that each of these homes is going to be making, I think we're passing this point a little too fast. Each of the homes is going to be making their grid more reliable, right? So the reason why your battery contributes to the grid is to help make the grid less likely to fail.
Yeah.
So you're a part of reducing the risk of outages in the first place. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, will the homeowner have the right to, pull, keep a higher reserve in a particular time? Most programs are allowing homeowners to do that, and do a weather based charging of the battery. It's going to come down to a region by region program for sure.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit. There's a big push going on for domestic content. The federal government is trying to really mess with the solar industry, creating a lot of turmoil and confusion, and it's sometimes difficult to see through that noise. No doubt, okay, if you're listening, just know that there is a great future for renewable energy in the United States. The turmoil is just superficial. And the fact that photons are super abundant and free, and we now have affordable technology to capture and store those photons in electrons, means that the future is bright with clean energy. But as far as domestic content goes, what is your strategy?
Well, we announced a partnership with LG Electronics and LG Energy Solutions in Michigan. They have production of battery cells here in the U.S. BMS hardware, case hardware. They're the foremost domestic content battery supplier next year, and we're coming in the position of being their residential battery partner for the industry, for the residential sector, as they focus mostly on utility scale.
Okay.
And that is one of the things that we were able to put together after about a couple years of deep relationship building and planning with them. So this is something that's been a long time in the making, and it just kind of came to fruition right in time for the changes that we were seeing in FEOC and in domestic content requirements. So strategy there is try to get a hyper compliant unit that's not dependent on Chinese IP. We don't have to source directly from Chinese companies. So that you'll see us execute on next year. But actually, the other half of the strategy is us releasing a next generation FIOC battery, cash battery, that works with our same energy management system for the most cost effective cash and loan system that we can develop. Right. And so we want to kind of go both ways, where we have a common EMS, inverter, and energy management system, and we have either a domestic battery you can put on it to make a domestic compliant system, or you have an imported Chinese battery that you can put on it that's a lot more cost effective, but ultimately gets no tax credit on the entire job.
Right. Yeah, and it's always a complex calculation. Do you take the cheaper foreign-made materials or work with a more expensive American-made that has better tax incentives? There's no easy answer. It's good to have options. Everybody wants to start with a domestic content solution, maybe, but you might find out through that process that you're better off just going with a Chinese battery. So stay tuned and keep your options open. Should we talk more about some of the other things? You're working on a factory in Texas, or you have propped up a factory in Texas?
We've propped one up. We started producing earlier on this year, back in March. So we've been producing batteries ever since.
And,
Um,
but it's batteries and smart panels and hybrid inverters.
it's hybrid inverters. We started with the hybrid inverters. The battery production is actually, we were waiting for American cell supply. That's not going to hit until Q1 of next year. So we'll be making batteries out of the unit, out of the factory later on next year. So that's our expectation is American made batteries by early Q2. That goes with the inverter solution, which is already coming out of Texas.
Got it. Got it. Well, what else should our listeners know about EG4, Signature Solar, and anything else related to whole home?
I mean, just who we are. We're an American-owned company with no foreign ownership. We've started here and have always been controlled here, and we're out to really expand the boundaries of where solar makes sense. We think it's been too much focused in urban areas with smaller systems, and we know that there's an independence-minded American homeowner everywhere that just wants cost-effective hardware that cuts through the noise and makes it cheaper for them to make their own power, regardless of what their environmental motivation is. And I think that's something that we see every day. We're building products that go after that problem better and better every day. So this is a journey we're on to make solar more accessible to people in the United States. That we think that the real coming majority is going to be 99% of an industry we maybe penetrate less than 1%. Less than 1% of homes in America have a battery on them. We think that's going to change, and it's going to be it'll reach a majority in my lifetime. So we want to be a part of that, and we particularly want to go after some areas where batteries still don't make sense, and we want to build solutions that really make that possible. So it's who we are. We kind of are focused on that mission as a company, and we're building and growing and learning as we do. But this is something we're absolutely committed to being better and better at, and being the partner that installers and homeowners need to get the job done in areas where solar just hasn't made sense before.
Hey guys, are you a residential solar installer doing light commercial but wanting to scale into large C&I solar? I'm Tim Montague. I've developed over 150 megawatts of commercial solar, and I've solved the problem that you're having. You don't know what tools and technologies you need in order to successfully close 100 kW to megawatt scale projects. I've developed a commercial solar accelerator to help installers exactly like you. Just go to cleanpowerhour.com, click on strategy, and book a call today. It's totally free with no obligation. Thanks for being a listener. I really appreciate you listening to the pod. And I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Go to Clean Power Hour and click strategy today. Thanks so much. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please tell a friend about the show. That's the best thing you can do to help others find this content on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and all of that can be found at cleanpowerhour.com. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love hearing from my listeners. And with that, James, how can our listeners find you?
Yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn, or send me reach out to EG4 Electronics and work with business development team that we have there. And I tend to be at the trade shows listening to people in person. So come and see us, at your RE Pluses and Inner Solars, and we'll be seeing you guys around.
I want to thank James Showalter with EG4 for coming on the show. With that, let's grow whole home storage. I'm Tim Montague. Take care.
Thanks, Tim.
The Clean Power Hour is brought to you by CPS America, maker of North America's #1 three-phase string inverter, with over 10 gigawatts shipped in the U.S. The CPS product lineup includes string inverters ranging from 25 kW to 350 kW. Their flagship inverter, the CPS 350 kW, is designed to work with solar plants ranging from 2 megawatts to 2 gigawatts. CPS is the world's most bankable inverter brand and is America's #1 choice for solar plants, now offering solutions for commercial, utility, ESS, and balance of system requirements. Go to chintpowersystems.com or call 855-584-7168 to find out more.